Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you for another episode of I Am Dad podcast as we are in our season 4, y'all. We'll continue to move along. Awesome guests, brilliant minds, provocative thought. All of that stuff is already happening at a high level in season 4. And we intend to bring you even more of that as we continue to move through this 2025. Today, we have the pleasure of bringing in a good friend and a board member, actually, of Fathers Incorporated, Mr. Dorsey Levens. His name is etched in football history, celebrated as a Green Bay Packers legend, Super Bowl champion, and Pro Bowl running back. A Syracuse native, Levens carved out a stellar career with resilience and determination, overcoming injuries to shine on the biggest stages in the NFL. Beyond the gridiron, Levens has embraced life after football as a mentor, motivator, and advocate for the importance of preservation, perseverance, mindfulness, and fatherhood. With roots in Notre and Georgia Tech football, his journey is a testament to hard work, adaptability, and leaving a legacy both on and off the field. Today, we're going to delve into his remarkable career, his reflections on family and fatherhood, and his thoughts on life after football. Let's bring my good brother to the stage. How you doing?
KB, I'm good, man. How you doing?
I can't, as they say, if you play spades, I can't call it. I don't know if I have 9 or 10 at a possible or Boston. I don't know what I got right now, but I'm still going to have to play my hand. Thank you so much for joining us. Been wanting to have this conversation with you, and we've just been having some great conversations, particularly around getting people to kind of know the folks that are in particular spaces in community work and community service, whether it is direct services, whether it's technical assistance, whether it's looking at mental health, whether it's, in your case, looking at mindfulness, really trying to help people with some of the tools to be able to navigate life, because navigating life is not easy at all. But we start off our podcast in a very interesting way to get people to know a little bit about you that they may not know in context of our podcast. And that is, tell us your daddy story.
My daddy story?
However you want to tell it. Whatever your daddy story is, it's your daddy story.
Like my dad?
It doesn't matter. It just could be yours, how you're a dad, your dad. Everybody has a daddy story. If you at the party and we talking about daddy, what's your daddy story?
Man, I don't know if I guess for me, my daddy story would be I have a 10-year-old son.
Okay.
And we go back and forth every day. I call him the greatest son ever. He calls me the greatest dad ever. That's my dog. That's my homeboy. But I think for me, my dad's story for my son is that I'm not raising him the way I was raised. You know what I mean? I think a lot of us in the Black community, especially, well, pretty much everywhere, but from where I'm from in Syracuse, our dads ruled with an iron fist. It was no BS. It was do this or feel the wrath of this belt. You know what I'm saying? For me, growing up, I was scared of my dad. In hindsight, it was good because I was scared. I was scared to mess up because he was coming for me. But for me, I think my son is 10. He's never gotten a spanking. I've never hit him before. I'm just trying something new, man. I'm like, you know what? Let me see if I can't love this kid to death and see what happens. I don't want him afraid of me. You know what I'm saying? I do not want him afraid of me. And I've seen kids even in my family, when one of my cousins says something and you see the fear of God in these kids' eyes. I don't want that for my son. I don't want that and it may backfire and it might not work. But I'm all for love, man. I'm all for love. And if I can just talk to him, I mean,
Mhm.
if we keep him at 100, he on punishment right now. He's on punishment right now. Uh, just talking back to the teacher. But we have conversations about it. You know what I'm saying? I'm
Mhm.
like, listen,
Mhm.
this is what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. So all that fun shit you do all the time, over.
Mhm.
It's over.
Mhm.
But that for me, that's worked. And I have a 23-year-old daughter now, and I've only spanked her once. And I think she was probably maybe 10 or 11, maybe the same age as my son.
Mhm.
And I only hit her 3 times, KB, with my hand.
Mhm.
And the look on her face destroyed me. It was like,
Mhm.
man, of all the people who I thought would hurt me in this world, I never thought you would do it. I thought you had
Mhm.
my back. And when they say it's going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you,
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
I understood that day what that meant. And I was like,
Mhm.
you know what? There's got to be another way. There's got to be another way. And a lot of people don't understand, Ken, where these whoopings in the black community come from.
Right.
This this
Yeah.
this this goes back to slavery days. And what happened was, if you didn't get your kid in check before master did,
Mhm.
it could mean death. And we know
Mhm.
pain is the best teacher. And you learn
Right.
quick from an ass whooping. You learn
Mhm.
quicker than any other way. Um,
Mhm.
but that's where that stems from. We had to get the kids in check before master did, because if they weren't in check by the time he came around, it could be fatal.
Right. Yeah.
But
Mhm.
I ain't got
Yeah.
no slave master hanging over my shoulder right now, so I ain't got to do that. And that's and I'm not condoning anyone who feels like that's how they want to raise their kids. You do whatever you feel is best for you and your family. But for
Mhm.
me, I just I got to change the cycle, man. It's got to start. It's got to start. The cycle has to end somewhere. It's
Yeah, I
got to end.
remember saying to somebody the other day, we were talking about similar conversation, and I said, "There's a fine line between nurturing dad and Joe Jackson."
Yes.
Right? Because nurturing dad wants to create an environment where their children can grow and nurture and be the best they can be. And that is the same reason that Joe Jackson is who Joe Jackson was. But he felt that that was the way in which he was a father to the Jackson boys and the girls to a lesser extent, was about putting you in the best possible position to be the greatest I know you can be, whatever that cost is to me, because I think that sometimes those older dudes back then, the Joe Jacksons of the world, the Richard Wrights, Richard's, what's
Williams.
the name?
Serena.
Yeah, Williams.
Venus and Serena's dad.
Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you go back and you look at them, I mean, even what's his name from with the ball, LeVar Ball.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
even with his sons, it's like, you know, you can say he was whatever, but his prophecy was my boys are going to X, and I am going to ensure that they reach X regardless of what you think of me. And then you turn around and look, and his boys are at X. Now, someone else can say, but there's a sacrifice in doing that. And you talked a little bit about that. Like the sacrifice of being that kind of dad takes away your ability to ever experience real love with your child.
Yeah. I have, for my kids, man, and my daughter was my firstborn. I think that was my first taste of unconditional love. But when you get a son as a man, that's a whole nother level of love, at least for me. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I'm like, I got to make sure he's straight, but I'm gonna talk to him and I'm gonna love him. And when it comes to sports, man, and my dad he let me play. You know what I'm saying? He criticized me when he needed to, but he never rode me all the time. I was one of them
Mm,
kids I loved to play. And he knew that in order to I mean, don't get me wrong, I got my ass whooped a few times. But in order to get me straight, all you had to do is take away sports.
mm,
I just left my mom's house with my son. We had to get some leaves up in her yard. And my mom told my son that, because we were talking about him because he can't play his video games. He's got a whole bunch of video games for Christmas that he
Mhm.
can't play until the 17th because his punishment, that's when it's up. But my
Mhm.
mom told him, she was like, I remember one time your father was acting up in school, just like you doing, and we wouldn't let him play in a football game that weekend. Said straightened everything up. From that point on,
Right.
I was on the straight and narrow.
Mhm.
So and that just confirmed it for me.
Right.
It's not about a ass whooping. It's about taking away what they like to do.
Right.
You
But
get
we're
to
in a
say,
different space now, right? Because you spoke earlier about not having master over your shoulder. Um, and there is a piece of me that believes we still do. He just looks different. He's in a different form. And that form is expectation,
okay,
right? Because expectation is I have an expectation of my child, and that expectation is over my shoulder. And while it may not be master, it is putting me in position to ensure that my child meets that expectation. But we're also in a different space that that kind of parenting, to a certain extent, is less about survival, but there are still elements of our culture to which it still is about its survival, right? Especially when you're talking about boys. Because at some point, you and I have a 16 and 17 in my house, and you have a 10. It's my first boys. I've all had girls, right? And you had older girls. So my experience in parenting has been with girls. Now I have these teenage boys coming through. At some point, I got to have this conversation when they finally get their license and driving about how do you get home safe? Like, what
man,
does that look like?
I've had that conversation with my daughter. I was like, it's no matter how you feel about the situation, no matter how wronged you may feel or how unfair it may seem, I need you to swallow your ego for about 15,
Mhm,
20 minutes. I need you to swallow it. Yes, sir. No, sir. Make sure you get your ass home. That's it.
mhm,
That's it. Don't no talking back. No conflict. No confrontation. Get home. And that's the
mhm,
conversation we all got to. Like you said, you got to have once they start driving. You got to have that conversation with them because this is the world we live in. And history says if you ain't acting right, you might not make it home. And they can
mhm.
find the police can find any reason to do to pull that trigger and get away with it. So yeah, I've had that conversation with my daughter. I haven't had it with my son yet, but it's coming. It's coming.
Mhm. Yeah, when you think about your journey, because a lot of parents have aspirations and kids too have aspirations of playing um, sports at its highest level, whether it is the NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, NHL. There is still a journey and a pathway, to get there. And there's a certain protection at his place. I remember, man, I can't think of his brother's name. He was in he played for the Saints, and we did a video on child support. And Bahati Van Helton Trust paid for us to do a series of videos around child support for the NFLPA. And he told his story in the break room, Dorsey, that I've never forgotten. And he talked about how being a football player, he says that because I was so big and because I was so athletic, he said that football helmet, in essence, was my shield. Like when I had my football helmet on, there's this metaphoric shield around me in my community where people protect me. He says, and then when I became a high school star, it protected me from more things. He says, and then when I became a collegiate star, it protected me from even more things. And then when I became an NFL player, that helmet was in essence my shield from a lot of things. And he said, and then one day I had to put my helmet down and I didn't have my helmet anymore. He says, and I felt naked. And I was like, what do you mean by that? He says, all these things that helmet protected me from as a little boy all the way up until a man no longer exist for me. And now I have to figure out how to navigate the world without that shield protecting me. Does that when I heard that, that just put chills in my body when I heard it.
Yeah, I've never heard it put that way, but I understand exactly what he's talking about. I think there comes that time once we're done playing, we got to figure out what the next step is. Because
Mm,
you're not a football player anymore. This is football is not a job you can write off until the regular retirement is 65. It don't work
Right.
like that. So you got to kind of figure out what your next steps are. And NFLPA, they have a lot of programs designed to help guys trying to figure out, what that next move is. But it can be and has been jarring for a lot of guys trying to find out what that next move is going to be.
Hmm. But that journey into that space, what does that look like? Because I don't think parents understand what it looks like. We do all the things that we think we're supposed to do. We pay for the trainings, we pay for the equipment, we send them away in the summer, we do all of those things.
Yeah.
But we don't really know anything about the life and what that life. And Bahati said something to me also one time. We were in Vegas and I was doing a training for them around marriage and relationships. And we were sitting downstairs in the hotel and they were coming to the event, and some of them were limping, some of them were walking slow. And I said, man, some of these dudes like look really hurt. And Bahati was like, man, you have no idea. He says, we have brothers that come to our training that literally can't come to the training because the light's too bright in the room or it's too cold in the room. And he started talking about all of these different scenarios, for these guys who were coming in. And he says, many of them have their entire life has been geared to being an NFL player. And the first year they stepped on the field, they got an injury that took that away. And they're trying to mentally readjust at the same time that their body is reminding them that you've been in a battle for most of your life. And I don't think a parent understands that when it comes to their children in sports, more specifically football, basketball to a lesser extent, but definitely football.
Yeah, well, they equate every time you get tackled on a football field to being in a car accident. So call me a crash test dummy, I guess, right? Because that's just like it's crazy. But there are inherent risks to playing this sport, man. If you look down the line too, my son hadn't played tackle football yet, and his mom was like, eh. And I'm like, and I get it. The game is safer to a certain extent, but football is 100% injury rate. If you play football, you're gonna get hurt. Ain't no way around it. What we're finding out now more recently is the long-term effects of concussions and what that can do to people. Guys can't function. Matter of fact, my old teammate Brett Favre just got diagnosed with Parkinson's. So they're definitely risks, man. And it's not. I wasn't, like I said, my pops didn't force me to play. You know what I mean? It wasn't like you got to train here and you got to. I was a gym rat. I played basketball in high school, a couple of state championships, All-American, all that stuff. But I loved playing. It wasn't because somebody was like, you got to go train and you got to go do this. That wasn't it. I don't know if I was back in New York. I'm sure it's like in Syracuse, but before we had cell phones, before we had call waiting, whatever that park was on Saturday at 10 a.m., half the city gonna be there. And we're gonna ball out. That's just the way I grew up. It wasn't forced upon me, but it's a different life, KB. I did a mindset training presentation for the top 30 managers at Google from around the world. And what they wanted me to talk about was job security. I said, all right, let me tell you a little bit about my career and what job security meant at that level. It's non-existent. It's you can get cut any single day. You know how I know? Because there's so many days I came in that locker room and there was an empty locker. And then, when you come in for breakfast and then when you come back after lunch, somebody else shit is in that locker, somebody they just signed. 90% of the guys on our team had month-to-month leases for their apartments. And we all leased furniture because you just didn't know.
Right.
And they're worried about it. And I'm like, listen, you can still thrive in uncertainty. You can't quit because you might get cut. That's not how it works. And if you do get cut, it's 31 other teams, or you can do something different. But job security, I don't even know. I don't know what that means.
And that's not just sports right now. That's everywhere. You ain't
Right?
got no
Yeah.
job security nowhere.
Nowhere. You know, but you
Right.
know, if you're resilient enough, you can pick up and keep moving. You know, if you were successful or diligent enough to get to that level of success, you can do it again someplace else. I mean, if you watch, I'm a big fantasy football, and I watch these quarterbacks who, like Sam Darnold from Minnesota, who was trash with the Jets, right? And
Mhm.
now they're
Yeah.
14-2. He's probably going to the Pro Bowl, right?
Mhm.
You know, that's how it works. He was thrown in. He was left for dead. He was left for
Right.
dead, and now he's definitely going to be a Pro Bowl quarterback this year.
Yeah, I'm in fantasy football too, and Sam, I literally just put him in my lineup for this week. It was between him and Baker Mayfield. I was going back and forth, but they playing
That's
Detroit.
another
Yeah,
example. Baker Mayfield, been on 7 different teams. Ask him about
yeah.
job security. I would love to hear his answer about that.
Yeah, and so, so one of the other things I remember him talking about was, I remember saying to him, I was like, "Man, you keep having me come out here and do these trainings for these retired players and ex-players." I'm like, "Yo, how do I get to the rookies, man?" I was like, "I want to get in the room. I want to talk to the rookies." He's like,
Yeah,
"Nah, dude." He's like, "You ain't ready." He says, "That ain't happening." I was like, "Why?" He said, "They not ready." And I was like, "What do you mean they're not ready?" He said, "They chasing." He says, and when they chasing, they don't want to hear about the dangers of where they're going. They're single focus minded
yeah,
on getting through. He says, so they're not really willing to listen until they have no other choice to listen.
yeah.
Do you find that it was a little bit hard for you to hear people tell you things like the average career in the NFL is 3 to 4 years, and you're like, nah, I'm gonna be around for 10, 15. And like, if you do, that's an anomaly, but that's
No,
probably not gonna happen.
I was a realist. I was a 5th round
Mm,
pick. I wasn't even sure I was going to make the team my rookie year. You know what I mean? So it was, like you said, it was a laser focus. You know, not knowing whether or not I was going to make the team. I remember my first training camp. Called my best friend when I got back to the hotel, and I was like, "Man, I don't. Everybody here is nice. Like everybody is good. Everybody's fast. Everybody's big. Everybody's strong. And we had 80 guys. And they had to cut the roster down to 53. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck. I don't know how they're gonna figure it out because I don't know.
right.
I don't know. But that's the nature of the beast, man. I tell you what I did remember in those rookie meetings.
Hmm.
It's probably why I've never been married to this day. Uh, by the way, the average NFL career is 2.6 or 7 years, 2.6
Is it?
or 2.7 years. They
Mm,
said, I know you talked about relationships. They said, if you're married while you're in the NFL, the divorce rate after 3 years of your retirement is 85%.
wow.
85%. And then they said, of that 85%, 2 years later, the bankruptcy rate for those guys is 85%. So I tell you what I did do. I listened to them damn stats. I was like, man, listen, I like to gamble. I love to sit at a blackjack table. But if I know I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna lose 85% of the time, I'll tell you where I ain't going.
Right. Right.
So there I did listen. I definitely listened.
Hmm. But you can understand it. Guys are bright eyed. They bushy. They think they glamour, especially now when with the advent of social media, and you're looking at careers and you're seeing the highlights of people's careers, but ain't nobody posting their lowlights, right? And so you don't see the lowlights of what's happening in the background. I'm looking at Deion Sanders and his boys, right? And I'm saying, man, what a privilege it must be to be on the sideline to watch your kids come up through a system, and being able to be there through the beginning of either one of their careers. I'm not sure where the younger one is going, but at least Shador is going to be in the top 4 or 5, this year, and to be able to watch that and do that. Man, I learned so much. I'm talking to you now. Now, as all these things that Bahati said in my head are like coming to me now. One of the other things he said to me when we were talking about fatherlessness, and he said, "Yo," he said, "Fatherlessness is not an NFL issue. And I said, what do you mean by that? He says, in high school, you are in high school in the hood, you are more likely not to see fathers in the locker room. He's like, when you get to the collegiate level, you are more apt to see more fathers in the locker room. By the time you get to the NFL, that's all you see in the locker room is fathers. And he says, I really believe that what are the components to getting a kid to professional level sports is having a father or a positive male role model in their lives.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And for me, it wasn't only my dad; it was my uncles. It was Syracuse, New York raised me. KB,
Yep.
you know what I'm saying? The
Yeah.
community raised me.
Mm-hmm.
My parents had me. My mom just turned 16 when she had me. Like 2 weeks after she turned 16, she had me. My dad was 18 at the time, so I spent a lot of time in my grandmother's house. Right, a lot of time. Both my grandmothers didn't really have a relationship with either one of my grandfathers, but my uncles, my older cousins. Hey, young man, what you doing? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
They all looked out for me. They all gave me a couple of dollars when you know how they do. Hey, a couple of dollars. Go get you a soda or something.
Right.
But for me, it was the positive role, the males in my life, especially my coaches. You know,
Mm-hmm.
my football coaches, man, they were my JV coach Dwayne Ford, my high school coach Lorenzo Jackson, brothers. Um, but they kept me on the straight and narrow, and I love them for that, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel for guys who don't. There's so many of us in Little League I can think about. I wasn't the best guy on the team in Little League. I wasn't. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like fourth or fifth guy.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys, they just fall by the wayside. And these guys ain't got none of them have father figures. All the guys who fell by the wayside, like all of us who went to high school and played and maybe got a scholarship and went to college, all had a father in the house.
Wow. Yep.
And the
Wow.
guys who didn't, they didn't make it. I'm not saying that's the reason why, but there's got to be a connection somewhere along the line.
Yeah, nah. He said, nah. He said, when you see these stories like Terrell Owens and all, he said those are those LeBron James. He said those are anomaly stories. He
Yeah.
said they get highlighted because they match the societal narrative that people want to believe. He says, but in reality, that is not the case when it comes to professional sports.
Yeah.
That daddy is somewhere, uncle is somewhere, brother somewhere in the space. You may not see him, but he's definitely, there to watch his child. I just think that that's something, as you were kind of talking, you've never written a book, have you?
No, I've gotten an outline. I've gotten probably about 75 pages, but I never the
Come on, man. We got to get that. I'm going to
storyline
be
the
your,
storyline because I don't I want to tell a journey, but I also want to tell the mindset side of it as well. You know what I'm saying?
okay.
So the story keeps changing. It's
So I
not
already know the title of your book. As you're talking, I'm like, the title of his book is called Fifth Round.
I like that. I like
Right?
that.
Because that's metaphoric to what you're talking about, which is there are many of us in our lives who will only go as high as the fifth round. But that doesn't mean that's low on the journey of life, because the fifth rounder can also meet number one status.
Yeah, Tom Brady was a six
Right?
round
Tom
pick.
Brady's another. You and him are perfect examples of fifth rounders. Like, and I'm sure
No,
there's a
Tom
thousand
was a
others.
six.
Right.
Yeah. So it's
Right.
it's it's possible, man. It's anything is possible. Anything is
Yeah, I'm
possible.
gonna be offline. We're gonna talk. I'm gonna get you through. We're gonna get that book. We're gonna get that book written. Um, I want to move into the other space, and this is the after career. I might slingshot back a little bit, but you're now moving into a space where you're having a lot of conversation, and you've done something for us, and we're going to continue to do more. I'm even embracing this conversation and really thinking about it in our work around this whole notion of being mindfulness, being aware, self-actualization, right? Being able to be in the moment of your life, in the moment of your situation. Talk to us a little bit about how you got there, and then what is that work?
So I've always been a big self-help guy. I've spent a lot of time in Green Bay reading books. then there wasn't shit else to do up there. And it's just always been intriguing. So what happened was a lady that I know, I was training young athletes. I had a lacrosse player. His mom went to Georgia Tech before I did, and she was part of the first women's softball team at Georgia Tech. And she had developed the program. She brought me in, and she explained to me what it was. And I was like, man, I feel like you took every self-help book I've ever written and just condensed it into like a 2-hour presentation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was like, wow. But I also realized the more that I practiced it, the more peaceful I felt. You know, people ask me what I do now. I tell them I pedal peace. I'm a peace peddler. That's what I do. But it's life changing. It really is. And you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about awareness. It all starts with awareness, right? What are we thinking? 'Cause your whole life, everything goes through your brain. Everything. And once you realize what you think and why you're thinking it, because I usually only tell people, KB, I only want you to worry about this when you're stressed, like when you're emotional. That's when you gotta slow down in that moment, like you said earlier, that present moment, and that's important because everything happens in the present moment. Everything, even if I'm worried about something that's gonna happen tomorrow, I'm doing it right now. Or if I'm worried about something that happened yesterday, I'm doing it in the present moment. So you gotta take control of your present moments.
Right.
But then when you're stressed, you gotta ask yourself, why am I stressing? Why am I upset? You know, the easy part, especially in Atlanta, is traffic. And I usually got to catch myself because I'm in that, like, I like to drive around 80. You know what I'm saying?
Me too.
But then these I call them campers. They camp out in the left lane and they don't move, no
Right.
matter what. And I have to catch myself because I'm used to, in my mind, judging these people. Now I'm getting mad. Why? I'm sorry you ain't got no place to go, sir, but I'm in a fucking hurry. Can you get out of the way, please? You know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. But then I feel you're like, Dorsey, you're getting mad about something you can't control.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, okay, I can't control it. Then being mad ain't gonna help it. Being mad is not gonna make this person move out of that left lane.
Right.
And now you sound like my kindred spirit on the highway. It'll be 15 cars over in that left lane going 60 miles an hour. And they just sitting there. And I can feel it. Why don't they learn how to drive? Who taught you? Where'd you get a license from? And then it's like, Dorsey, you got to chill. You're stressing out over something, you know. So that's the easiest way to explain it. But it's just, even in life, man, you know, there's so many things we stress over that we can't control or we can't change. Part of my program is total acceptance of what's going on. I call it IWII. It is what it is. So you got to accept what is. Stop saying, I wish this wouldn't have happened, or this should have happened, or this could have happened. No, this is where we are. Forget about how we got here. This is where we are. Now what we gonna do? What we gonna do right here? Because complaining about it ain't gonna change it.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about how you changed that mindset, because I was like, and particularly we both came from New York, but Syracuse and Brownsville is two different spaces of New York.
But the driving mindset down south, they drive slow. They ain't got no place to go.
Yeah.
And we up north, we don't drive slow. We drive like we got some place to go, because we do.
Well, let me tell you what happened to me the first time when I first came to Atlanta. So I'm in Atlanta. I'm over here in my office. I'm in the supermarket. I'm in line. And there's a young lady in front of the older lady that's in front of me. And she has a couple of items. And I'm in the back. I don't know what I have. But whatever it is, I'm like, yo, I got to get up out of here. I got to go. And you've seen this. Cashier and that person is having a full-on conversation about something that ain't got nothing to do with what they doing. So here's me. I'm behind the lady. I'm
starting to seethe on the inside. Yep. I know, brother, trust me, I know that feeling.
So the lady turns around and she goes, the white lady, she turns around and she says, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, I said, I just need to get out of here. And she goes, where are you from? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, where are you from? You're not from Georgia. She said, where are you from? I said, oh, I'm from New York.
Yeah.
She goes, let me give you a piece of advice. She says, you're in the South now. She goes, in the South, we take time to live. And part of living is connecting with whoever you happen to be with. So while they're connecting
Unless
up
I'm in a hurry,
there,
I ain't got time to connect, lady.
right? That's your mind, right? It's like, lady, get out of my way. Like,
Yeah, lady, I don't need to talk to you. I'm trying to get out of here. I need you to wrap
but
up
what
the
is
conversation with her and move on.
right? But then I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about it's a mindset. And if I'm going to be here, and you said it, you're a peace peddler. If I'm going to harness peace, I got to find a way to exist as the natives exist, right? And then I got to find out what it is about my own motor system that is moving so fast that I need to slow it down. A woman, when I was in New York, and this was before my wife, I was in a relationship. And no, we weren't married yet. And I was talking to her about how Tracy and I got into arguments every Sunday morning because I was trying to get to church to get the seat up front, and she's like moving on slow. And by the time she get there, we got to sit all the way in the back of the church. And if she just move a little faster, we can get to the front of the church. And she said, "Did you ever watch Speed Buggy?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You talking about the cartoon with the Doom Buggy car, the talking car?" She
Yeah.
goes, "Yeah." And she said, "What was the element of if when you look at a speed buggy, what's the characteristic of a speed buggy?" And I'm thinking, I'm like, it drives on sand, and but she goes, "No, when you look at it, what's the characteristic, the telling characteristic of a speed buggy?" And I said, "I don't know." She says, "The wheel in the back is larger than the wheel in the front." And she says, "You know the mechanics of that?" And I said, "What?" She says, "The wheel in the front spins faster than the wheel in the back. But here's the reality. The doom buggy always gets to the destination at the same time. You have to understand that your wheel moves faster than her wheel moves. You just have to be okay with being in the doom buggy, part of the doom buggy. And you don't want to disrupt the doom buggy because you don't want to separate your wheels from the car to get to the church, because then the back wheels don't get there. You don't want her to detach from you because then you don't get there. The task is figuring out what your cycle in life is and being okay with that, because that's not going to change. That's not something you can change. And so every time I'm in that third lane and I'm behind that person, my mind says to me, that's a person with a slow spin. And they really don't think they're going slow. They're going at whatever their pace is to get to wherever it is. My motor is just faster, because one of the things that really like pisses me off is, and you've done this, right? You on the street, you get around them, right? You finally get around them, you boom, you gone, and you have to stop at a light. And the next thing, the person pulls up next beside you. You're like, I, I left him like 3 miles back. How is this
Right,
car
right.
pulling up next beside me
Yeah,
if I'm
yeah.
doing all the speed? And so it gives me this kind of like perspective, and I've been able to kind of use that in life. And the other thing is, and I have to do this often, which is if I'm taking account of my spiritual side and bringing my spiritual side in the equation, and I am a believer that God is protecting me and has a hedge of protection around me, that person in front of me could be slowing me up for a reason,
I was just
because
about to say that.
possibly there's an accident up there that's about to happen, that if you were doing 80, you would be in it as opposed to behind it, or you would be in front of it as opposed to with it. And so if you're in that situation where I tell Tracy, this is my captivity nexus. That's what I called it. My captivity nexus. When the car's in front of you is going too slow, and then the one on the side of you is going the same speed, so you
You
can't get around them. You
trapped.
I said, I'm in the captivity nexus right now. I said, you know what? God knows that if that person wasn't on the side of me, I would have spun around them. So not only does he put one in front of me to slow me down, he puts one on the side of me so I can't get around. And at that moment, it's like, whatever's happening in the universe, whatever's going on, I'm going to believe that something is happening that I'm not supposed to be there. You need to relax yourself and slow down. Getting to the meeting 3 minutes earlier than you would have gotten there ain't gonna make a hell of a difference because the person ain't got there yet and you're gonna be standing outside waiting for them to open the door anyway. And so relax a little bit. So when you do that work and you're out there talking to folks who think like you and I, how difficult is it to get them in a space where they begin to start rethinking how they think about the moment?
It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. The analogy I like to use is working out, right? If you haven't worked out for 5 years and you decide you want to work out because it's a healthier choice, you'll be less stressed, you'll look better, you feel better. You can't go to the gym for an hour and a half and then come home and look in the mirror and say, man, this shit ain't even working. You can't do that. You know, it's a process, just like your body. And the thing is, we've been thinking this way our whole lives, right? I had to put a lot of thought into what goes on into the Atlanta traffic in order to have peace of mind about it. So here are the facts. We from the north, people are from the south. There's different ways we drive.
Right.
Women drive differently, and that's all I'm gonna say. I don't want to get in no trouble. Women drive differently, right? Think about all the people from all over the world in Atlanta. Atlanta's a melting pot.
Right.
And how they drive back at home. Everybody's different. Imagine somebody who's been in some car accidents, or maybe somebody lost somebody in a car accident, or maybe you went in a car accident and somebody else died in the car with you. They're going to drive a little differently. So we got all these people on the same highway. Everybody's going to drive differently. And that's just the reality of it.
Right.
Just like you said earlier, I've already had that conversation with myself, but then it goes back to, don't forget divine timing. You're being guided, like you said. God's got you in this little trap on the highway because he knows he's watching over you. You need to be right here. Because maybe if you ahead, maybe you're going to have interaction with a car up there and something's going to happen.
Right.
So you got to trust.
Right.
You got to surrender and trust. You know that, you know what, I'm being guided. I prayed for guidance this morning. And then when we
he's giving it to me and now I'm mad.
And now we're mad. now we're mad about the answered prayer. Right? It's everything is in here, man. It's all inner dialogue, the inner conversations that we have with ourselves. That's what talks you off the ledge of stress.
Right. Now I've heard that, particularly for the quarterback position, and I'm sure for the running back position as well, that the greatest players in those positions in football are the ones who can slow the game down, who can still move at the quickness that's necessary to move, but can see things and slow it down in their mind, not necessarily in their body, but can slow it down to see more things than other people can serve. Is that the same thing? Is that a level of mindfulness where you can slow things down, still move at your pace, still move at your speed, but be able to see more than other people can see?
Yep. But like anything else, it takes time and it takes practice and it takes patience. Think about rookie quarterbacks. You know, there's always, the Jaden Daniels, the anomalies. But when you hear rookie quarterbacks say, what's the biggest difference? The answer is always the same: the speed of the game. It's what I alluded to earlier. When I got to the league, ain't nobody slow, ain't nobody trash, ain't nobody father donate money to the school scholarship fund so they was playing when they shouldn't have been playing. Nah, this is a business, and everything moves faster. And what happens is, it doesn't slow down. You get used to it, and then you adjust, right? And then you adjust. It doesn't. The defense ain't gonna go, oh, we got a rookie. We can't play that fast today. We want to make sure he's comfortable over there. We don't want to hurt his feelings. So everybody slow down a little bit. Nah, don't work like that. You got to catch. I had to catch up to it. Because in college, you get a hole, and it's a hole right there. It's gonna stay a hole, and you can run through that hole, and you can get some daylight. And in the league, there's a hole, and like, bam, it's gone. Like, what the shit? All right.
Right.
And then you gotta like you said, so as a running back, what you got to do is you got to be full speed, but you got to be under control.
Mm.
And that takes time to practice because you got to be able to stop and cut on a dime, right? There is no running back is improv. There's no script. You
Right,
know,
right.
you
Right.
draw up a play, and this guy's supposed to block this guy, and this guy's supposed to block the linebacker. Well, my running back coach used to always say, them guys on the other side of the ball, they get paid too,
Right.
right?
To stop you.
To stop you. The thing that you're trying to do to them, they're getting paid to stop you from doing it.
Right.
So it's always everything is fluid, play to play, game to game. And what people don't understand too is that, like, as frazzled as I was as a rookie, because the game was moving so fast, once the regular season started, it picked up a notch. Once the playoffs started, it picked
Yeah.
up 5 notches.
Mm.
As they say, it's levels of this shit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And you just you have to adjust. And the guys
Mhm.
who can't adjust are the guys who can't make it.
What's the biggest lesson you learned in football about life?
My plans aren't going to go according to plan.
Mm.
It's just you can get to where you're going, but it may not look the way you think it's going to look. So when I got out of high school, I was one of the top 2 running backs in the country. I was like, I'm going to Notre Dame. I'm going to win the Heisman by the time I'm a junior, and then I'm going to leave and be a top 10 pick in the NFL.
Mhm.
That shit didn't work.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? But I'm in the Packers Hall of Fame, so something worked out.
Right.
So I would say the biggest lesson is set your goals and make plans, but be ready to adjust when you need to, because it's not going to look the way you think it's going to look. And that's a lesson I've taken with me through life from football. And you got to trust. You got to trust that you're on the right path, and that's hard when things don't go like you think they should go.
Mhm.
If I told you my story 10 years ago, you're like, damn, that shit was kind of rough.
Mhm.
But now after these years, I can go back and I can look at it and I can reframe, because now
Right.
I got the gift of hindsight, and it's
Mhm.
2020. I can look back at the year I got moved to wide receiver at Georgia Tech as a junior, and I was like, you know what? I ain't no fucking wide receiver. This shit is not going to work. I need to get a
Mm.
job. So what I
Mm.
did do was I graduated before I got drafted because I didn't think I was going to get drafted. Fortunately, they moved me back to running back my senior year. But the point is, they moved me to wide receiver, and I ended up playing one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play. And I was one of the best pass catching running backs in the league while I played.
Mm.
So was that a blessing or was that a curse? At the
Right.
time, I thought it was a curse.
Mhm.
But looking back at it, the universe was preparing me for what my next move was going to be.
Right.
But we don't have the gift of hindsight when we're in the moment. But there's so many
Mhm.
things like that happen in my life that I can go back and I'm like, man, I thought this was the worst shit that could have happened. And it actually helped propel me forward.
Mhm. But that's gonna be the beauty in your book. That's the 5th rank. That's the beauty. That's the beauty in that story. The beauty in that story is all things happen for a purpose, good
Yes.
and bad. That's the thing that people have to get to. Like, they don't get to that last thing that I just said. All things in life have a purpose, good or bad. Like, because
Yes.
people think that only good things have a purpose. No, very bad things also have a purpose. And some people get bad things that are very overwhelming and makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yep.
But if you live long enough and not stand on your own understanding and wait for the thing to play itself out, you can look back at something extremely tragic in your life and say, I understand why that happened. Now, it was unfortunate for the people who lost their lives or whatever happened to me in the midst of that life. But I can look at it today and say to myself, if it wasn't because of that, I wouldn't be here right now, or this wouldn't have happened right now, or I wouldn't have done this, or I wouldn't achieve this. And that's a hard thing to get your mind wrapped around, especially when you're going through it.
Yes.
It's easier to get your head around it when you've gone through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, like we talked about earlier, once you see the whole picture,
Right.
then it starts to make more sense,
Right.
and one of the biggest things, man, and we don't grow and we don't evolve in our comfort zone. We just don't, man.
Mm,
Shit's got to happen.
mm,
Shit's got to go wrong for you to
right.
really focus in and get outside of your comfort zone and grow. You
Right.
know, if you're comfortable, everything is going right. There's no reason to change.
Right.
But the only constant in the universe is change. Everything changes. Right?
Absolutely.
Nothing stays the same. Everything changes. And the things that made me uncomfortable or even hurtful, you know who Mel Kiper Jr. is?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He said I was the most overrated player in the draft coming out.
Mm,
I hated Mel for 20 years. Hated his guts. But now when I look back on it, I would say thank you, Mel.
right.
Because apparently that's what I needed to hear to move to the next level.
Right.
If I didn't hear that, I don't know what happens. But when I tell you that lit a spark, shit.
Yeah.
As hurtful as it was in that moment, I think the universe is like, okay, you want a little extra motivation? Turn on ESPN real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
as
Yeah. Yeah.
much as it hurts, you know what I mean? It lit a fire. It lit a fire.
Yeah, I'm writing my book, one of my memoirs. I'm probably about 60% through it now. The name of the book is Too Seasoned to Care: Why I Don't Give a F About What You Think About Me Anymore. It's a book on aging, and it's a book on how when we get older in life, our priorities change and we don't care so much about how people think about who we are and how we got to where we are, that you begin to start making sense out of life. And one of the chapters I finished a couple of weeks ago was on this point, and I talked about how when I wrote my first book, I hadn't written the whole book. I just had the transcript, and I got invited to Circle of Sisters in New York City. Circle of Sisters was real big back in the day, WBLS, and there was all kind of writers and
Okay.
celebrities and everything there. So I'm on this panel with Ron and his wife. I think oh my goodness, who was the other celebrity? I can't even remember the other celebrity on that team, and me on that panel. And I didn't have a book. I just had my transcript. But they called me to come in and talk about writing a book unpublished and blah, 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 blah. Fast forward, we get to the end. We're all off stage. People come up to the stage. My wife is now, Tracy is pregnant with KJ. His wife and Tracy is now having a conversation, and they're over motherhood, I'm sure. They're talking. I take a step back, give them some breath so that they can talk. So one comes over, and then I move over towards them, and then we end up taking a picture together. As soon as we finish taking a picture, he grabs, why am I forgetting? Her name starts with a J. He grabs her hand and says, "Come on, let's go." He doesn't even have a book. And it wasn't what he said, it was the way he looked at me when he said it. And my mind was like, no, this mom didn't like I'm on the same panel you on. Like, first of all, don't let me strip you because I know you didn't write your book. A ghostwriter wrote your book, right? And
Right.
so let's not go all the way there. But the motivation for me, Dorsey, after that was I need to get my book finished. And it took about 3 months later, my book was finished. And today now I have 13. And
Wow.
every book that I wrote and completed, whether it was the children's book, the graphic novel, whatever, to me was a triumph over that thing that he said to me now almost 20 years ago in 2003,
Yeah.
that you were trying to devalue who I was based on this tangible thing. I had a book. It just wasn't published. Your run, they're gonna publish yours and make money off of you anyway, just
Right.
because. Even if people didn't care about your conversation and your story, they still gonna buy your book. But to your point about some of the worst things that are said to us in life can be our greatest motivators.
Yeah. Yeah. It just happened to me recently, man. I was teaching spin class, and there's a young lady in my class who she would always do like some other shit, like on her own little program. So we had a meeting with some other instructors and some management, and she said, I get bored in your class. Now, the old me would have said, that's funny because 2 weeks ago, her and I took a class just one-on-one and she tapped out after 20 minutes. I want to say, were you fucking bored then? But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to listen. I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to listen because it felt like Mel Kiper Jr. all over again. It's like, you know what, Dorsey? You're supposed to learn something from this, so just be quiet and listen. And I think that's what the mindfulness does. It changes you from the inside out. And instead of attacking somebody who just attacked you, and there's some other stuff behind the scenes that was it's malicious, but it's neither here nor there. I'm just in a different frame of mind, and it's like, you know what? Well, maybe this place is not for me. Maybe I need to go someplace else. Change is inevitable. Yeah. It's inevitable. It's going to happen sooner or later. So the way my inner conversation was, you always ask for guidance. They're showing you the way out. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So let's just roll with it. No need to get up. I'm not going to be mad about it. I'm not going to hold no resentments. That being said, I had a class New Year's Day at a different place. And the owner came up. He was like, dog, you were like in your bag. Like that shit was incredible. Like, I was like, yeah, I had a spark relit again recently. So it's going to be a little different around here.
Get ready, as TDJ. Get ready.
Yeah.
Or as Anthony Ed would say, bring your ass.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Listen, brother, thank you so much. This is exactly what I wanted to do. Just have a conversation. I didn't want this to get formatted around football, career, just having a discussion. I think that of my podcast, these are the kinds of podcasts that people comment on the most when I'm just having a barbershop conversation with somebody around somewhat of who they are and what they do, but for the most part, things that people can hear, listen to, glean some level of insight and wisdom from that hopefully will help better their lives and change their lives in a way that God has designed for us to do, for our fellow man and woman. Thank you. I appreciate everything, y'all, man. As Bishop Ferguson always says, I love you, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
I like that.
And to the rest of my I Am Dad podcast listeners, you know how I like to leave you always being kind to others as you're kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend and mentor Art Mitchell always said to me, Kenny, it's important to be nice, but it's much more important to be kind. Thank you. God bless. Till next Sunday. Peace out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad Podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period. Yeah.